Welcome. It is amazing to see so many people joining us today. We're thrilled. You're not here to hear me or John, so I'll put that out right away so you know that this is going to be an extra awesome session. You're here to hear from the students. We have Stephanie Bayar, Jim Wallace, and Howard Goode today to give us their perspective of what they want in a case, what they enjoy in a case, and how cases have really informed, impacted, and hopefully pushed forward their careers. I don't know, we'll see how cases have informed them. Before we officially get into the panel, wanted to give everyone a deeper introduction here so you have an understanding of who you're going to be listening to today, and then wanted to show you some data that John and I were able to obtain before the panel, and then open it up, and John's going to be moderating the panel, which I'm excited about. So I'm Danielle Clark. I am the HR-OB co-chair for the HR-OB track co-chair for NACRA. I also sit on the board. I'm a director at large, and I was recently invited to be a part of the editorial board of CRJ. So heavily involved with NACRA. I appreciate everyone's mentorship and support over the years. I'm a Paul Lawrence Fellow. I've been coming to the conference for 4 years, and just wouldn't miss it for the world. I teach HR and OB. I am a tenure track instructor at Hillsborough Community College in Tampa, Florida. I also am a part-time lecturer at Northeastern University. And then my partner in crime today is John Varlaro. And John also heavily involved at NACRA. He is the track chair for the OB-HR track. And he is our upcoming VP of programs, which is thrilling. He is a professor of management at the College of Business at Johnson and Wales University. He teaches organizational behavior and human resource management. We now have our 3 panelists we're going to hear from, and we have Stephanie with us, Stephanie Bayar. She recently earned an MBA from Sonoma State University. Yes, she knows Armand quite well, actually, and Sergio. Stephanie graduated top of her class in the summer of 2020. She previously earned a Bachelor of Science in Business from Sonoma State University with a concentration in finance. And she has had a variety of different employment opportunities. She's worked accounts receivable and as a legal assistant. She is open to seeking new opportunities, and I'll make sure that I put her email address and everyone's email address in the chat. So if you want to network with Stephanie later, this is what this conference is all about. Please reach out to Stephanie with an opportunity that you might have. And so we have Jim with us. Jim comes from a career in healthcare and financial services, notably as the head of strategy of Anthem. He's the founder of the Wesley Group, the parent of a pioneering merchant bank in healthcare finance, and he is the chief executive of AmeriPlus, which is the nation's leading independent Medicare hospital network. Prior to his industry experience, Jim was a combat pilot in the U.S. Army and a strategy consultant with Bain Company. Jim, thank you for your service.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Jim has a Bachelor of Science in Engineering from the U.S. Military Academy, a Master of Business Administration from Harvard Business School, and he's currently pursuing his DBA with the University of South Florida. I graduated with my DBA from the University of South Florida last year.
Go Bulls.
Exactly, go Bulls. And then we have Howard here, and Howard's currently working in banking at Santander. He's a product, he works in product management. He's a part of that team. His role this year has pivoted from IT project management He joined the company right as he was finishing his MBA at Bentley University in 2019. He knows Janice very well. So Howard's been working in IT since 2000, most recently as an IT consultant, business analyst, project manager in healthcare. He has his PMP certification. And during his MBA, he had the opportunity to go through a directed study course with Janice Goode. And he researched cutting edge IT technology, blockchain, and him and Janice, Janice was the teacher for that directed study, actually went on to publish that discussion case together. And the case is called The Good Shepherd Pharmacy and Remedy: Will This Blockchain Deliver Donated Drugs to Needy Patients? And it was published. For those of you who still get your hard copies in the mail, I was so excited to see the hard copy in the mail last week. That case has been published, and it won, an earlier version won bronze at NACRA 2019. So what's great about Howard is not only is he coming with us with a fresh student perspective, but he also knows a little bit about the pain and suffering and the beauty that comes with writing a case. So, woo, okay, we have some talent here. I'm excited to kickstart this. So what I want to do before we get into the panel is chat a little bit about John and I's behind the scenes chats a few months ago. John and I, over the summer, ended up on the phone a lot, brainstorming. You know, what are we genuinely curious about as it relates to cases, and what data would make us better, and what are the clients, the students saying about the cases, and we really wanted to focus our understanding on professionals that we're out and about in the business world now, and understand what impact, if any, cases have made on them. We oftentimes get that in the moment feedback. Oh, this was a great case, or I'm going to remember it forever. But do they? Right? And you know, is it in one ear, out the other? And so with that, John and I created a really basic pilot survey that I ended up sending to my LinkedIn friends. So some of you might have participated as well, just to get an understanding of who are you, and how has cases in the classroom impacted who you are now today as a successful business professional. And I'd love to share some of that data to help inform the panel. Let's see here. I'm gonna attempt to share my screen here. Bear with me. I think I have it. Okay, John, can you let me know? Can you see my pilot study here?
We can see it, and absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Good.
And if you click it twice, it'll actually maximize it for the audience.
All right. So I need to click twice.
I think the audience, if the audience clicks it twice,
oh,
it'll
perfect.
maximize
Yes,
it for them.
if they click into that. Perfect. Thanks, John.
Yeah.
Okay, so again, a pilot study. John and I have hopes of taking our research further as it relates to the impact of cases. And this was just something fun and simple we did over the summer to better understand cases. And you'll see here that the first question we asked was, who are we talking to? Who's taking this survey? We had 28 responses from my network respond here, and you'll see that the high majority of respondents had some sort of an undergraduate degree, and that they majored or minored in a business-related field or graduated from a master's program. And here, just to make sure we were talking to the right audience, we asked if during their academic studies, if they experienced the use and analysis of case studies, and we took the time to clarify what we meant through a case study. And so you can see here that the high majority had some experience with cases in the classroom. This was really cool. This just happened by luck that we had a really solid mix of females and males answer this pilot survey, so you'll understand who's responding is equal as it relates to gender. And here, as it relates to a primary business focus, the majority of the respondents had a general business focus in their academic studies. And then we have a splash of other fields, accounting and marketing. And this came out really exciting as well. As it relates to the 28 respondents, we heard from how long ago did you graduate with your highest attained degree. We had some fresh out of schoolers and we had some seasoned professionals that were 10 or more years away from their college experiences, and then two groups in between. And so this other question that we were curious about was, how many cases did you analyze in your studies? And the majority, 75%, analyzed 9 or more. And then that next group was just about 18%. And so what we found encouraging, now that you know the audience that took the time to give us this feedback, is here's what we learned from them. This is what John and I were curious about. And so learning from case studies better prepared me for real world situations. We like to think this, but we don't oftentimes talk to the student after they're not our student. And this was just really encouraging, and hope you walk away delighted to see these numbers. You'll see here that over 50% gave us the highest amount possible on this graph. That absolutely learning cases better prepared me for real world situations. You had a few that were neutral, and then you had a few that were at that 4 mark, but the high majority are like, yes, yes, yes. So keep doing what you're doing, keep writing, keep researching, keep teaching with cases. And you'll see this trend as it relates to the other questions we asked. Learning from cases strengthened my critical thinking skills. So this one jumped even further, where, you know, here's some foundational data that says yes. And we've heard it from people who have been outside of the classroom for 10 plus years, as you'll remember who our audience is, that cases are important. It's strengthening their critical thinking skills. We asked about leadership skills. We didn't see as high, but you still see the trends, right? That putting cases in front of students will help sharpen the leadership skills. And maybe this is an opportunity for us to think about cases. Maybe we need to frame more cases in a leadership light, or maybe we need to make sure that the protagonist is more of a leader. Lots to think about there. Here's what people said as it relates to how case studies helped their communication skills. So again, a very clear yes, cases are important, but not nearly as clear as, again, we'll look here when we're looking at the real world situations and critical thinking, but still very, very important. And gives us opportunity to think, well, how can we better serve our student and add more communication elements? I know in the roundtable I was chairing earlier, I had suggested a role play, and one of the instructors there had said, yikes, I had never even thought about a role play. I'm an introverted preference. So an example of where maybe we could heighten our research and writing abilities. And this one I love. Looking back on my academic years, I wish more cases had been presented in my classes. And so there's a need. We've heard from those who are out of school, living and working in the real world, they want our cases. So keep up the amazing work you're doing. John and I, we've got 20,000 ideas behind the scenes. We hope to turn some of these findings into a deeper dive survey and hope to come back to you next year with more. And I'm just gonna pop these here. We did give respondents an opportunity to fill in and give us some feedback as it relates to what they wanted to add from a learning perspective as it related to cases, things that we hadn't used, that we hadn't thought about before. And the comment for me that really stood out was this professional that says that they still use cases today to analyze ideas and opportunities, even though they're outside of the classroom. So again, really, really encouraging. I'm going to leave this here for a second just to give you a chance to breeze through it, or take a snag of it, if you will, if you want to look at it later. If anyone's interested in this data, I'm going to make sure that I put my email address, John's, and the panelists in there. Feel free to reach out to me. We can answer more questions and share anything that you'd like. All right, I'm gonna see if I can get out of this. Can you see me and not my screen now? Look at me go. Okay. So with that, I think now you have a better understanding of why John and I were so passionate to have students here. Where now's the juicy part, where now you get to hear from them directly, a student's perspective on cases and what they want and how it's impacted them. And John's going to take it away from us. I'm going to be available in the chat. We're not sure if we're going to have time for audience questions. If you have audience questions, put them in the chat and we'll do the best we can to answer or moderate. If not, we will put you in touch with the panelists so you can speak to them directly if there's anything that you'd like to know. So John, take it away.
Yeah. Sure. So I've got the easy part. I just ask the questions and let everybody else do the work. So as we're getting into this, each one of the panelists was given 9 questions ahead of time to prepare. For authenticity, Danielle nor I know what they've prepared or how they're going to respond. Obviously, we were there to support them if they had any questions, but we really wanted the voice of the panelists to come through. So what will happen is I've got the script in front of me. I will ask the questions. We may have time to have each panelist answer each one of these questions, or I may have to bounce around a little bit. Further, if in the chat box, which we absolutely love, if somebody poses a question and a panelist has the opportunity to respond to that while they're answering that, that'd be great. If not, we may look to do that at the end of the session as well. The other thing I would add is that if I do this for one of the panelists, that means that I'm trying to move us through a little bit so we can get there. Obviously, I'm not trying to cut anybody off, but I think this is the easiest sign for me to be able to do that. So with that, I'm going to start with the first question to Stephanie. Stephanie, if you can, please describe your experience with case studies. Within your answer, approximately, how many cases were you exposed to? How many cases were you asked to analyze? And in which classes did you engage with case study analysis?
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay, I always check first because I've muted myself more than once. In my business program, graduate, they both had studies as part of the capstone course, the final course you take last semester, capstone course. Those 2 courses had case studies. Primarily, that's what they were focused on, but those are the only 2 classes that I had that did have case studies, unfortunately. Undergrad, there was the last class, and then graduate, there was the last class that had case studies. In the undergraduate class, it was 6 or 7, maybe 8 cases. And the graduate was just 1 or 2 cases because it was mostly focused on writing your own case. So it was just a brief refresh before you dove into your own case. And in graduate and undergraduate, the end project was writing your own case. So it was from the perspective of reading and discussing and learning from cases, but also creating your own at the end. In addition, when I was a graduate student, I was also the student editor on Sonoma State's Wine Business Case Research Journal. So in that capacity, I also edited case submissions before they were published. So I kind of have the perspective of the publication side of the world as well as the student, and writing my own case is a capstone project as well.
Great. Thank you, Stephanie. And to clarify, when you said that your case experience in both your programs, it occurred only in the final class of each one of your programs, the capstone course.
Exactly. And that was unfortunate because, I mean, well, you'll hear me go on about how much I like case studies, but yeah, that was my only exposure to them, and I had none before those classes. So interesting. Yeah, thank you, Armand.
Good shout out to Armand. Thank you, Stephanie. James, same question. What was your experience with case studies in your program?
Sure. Well, in my undergraduate program, I studied engineering at West Point. We did have case studies there, but not the business school type of case studies. They were more real world examples and not written using a typical case format. And that was my first exposure. But when I left the Army and enrolled at Harvard, a business school, we had, I think I tallied the other day, 400 cases over the 2-year period. You typically have 5 classes a week with 5 cases per class per week. So I'm sorry, 5 classes a semester and 5 cases per week per class. So it was a pretty intensive environment. I actually chose the Harvard program because coming from the military, I didn't feel very well prepared for the business world. And I thought this would be a great chance to hone those skills. One difference I noted about the Harvard program versus my exposure after in business and at USF is that the Harvard program places the preponderance of your grade, the weight of your grade on class participation. So it's not necessarily getting to the right answer, it's exploring all facets of the case to define what the process to get to the right answer would be. And I found that, immensely valuable. One other difference that I noted was that in the traditional Harvard Business School case, there's typically a lot of exhibits that are red herrings. They're introduced so that students have to determine what's relevant information and germane and what isn't. And I really appreciated that coming from outside of the business world, because I had no metric or no calibration to really be able to say, hey, this is important or this wasn't. So I really honed that over 400 cases in 2 years there. At USF, we've done, in the 2-year DBA program, we do about 10 cases a trimester. And so we're probably going to end up doing about 50 cases over the 2-year period. Pretty similar experience, although probably less more focus on analytics and tying to theory, which you'd expect from a doctoral program, and less on class participation. Does that answer the question, John?
It does. If you don't mind me asking a follow-up, can you just repeat for everybody, for your Harvard program, what were you studying at Harvard and what was it?
I ended up studying general management and strategy. I went to work for Bain & Company after I left, and so most of my electives were in the general management and strategy area, business strategy, things like that. I minored in finance, but since I came from a quantitative background before, I really wanted to flex set in the non aspects of business, and so I focused a lot of my time on the organizational management issues, competitive strategy, those types of things that might not be central, finance, accounting, managerial economics type of things.
Thank you for that. And already we can hear a significant difference in exposure and usage of case studies. So Howard.
A little jealous.
Yeah. Howard, same question to you. What was your experience with case studies in all of your programs?
Absolutely. And thanks a lot, John, and everyone here. So I'll extend the perspective even a little further, in that I have 3 degrees now. My first 2 are bachelor's in chemistry and biochemistry, and then master's in information systems. And those were done in Jamaica, University of the West Indies. There we had an experience where there were cost constraints. And even though the professors wanted to use case studies more, then there was they kept bumping up against the cost of, well, can we afford the cases? Can we recommend these cases to our students? So in my undergrad, I used 0 cases. In my master's in information systems, I used probably about 3 or 4 cases total for the entire program. And that program was 2.5 years long. In my MBA, which I just completed here at Bentley University, that was a lot more intense. Here in America now, we don't have that cost consideration as we did back then. And so we find that the cases are used a lot more here, and in particular in the strategy courses, right? Like for IT strategy, Janice Logan taught, she was quite liberal with her application of cases. But we also had other cases, other courses that handled cases, supply chain, negotiation, leadership, where we were given 1 or 2 cases for those courses. But then in our keynote, right, that capstone course, we also had quite a bit of cases. And we also, just like Stephanie mentioned, we really appreciated what happened in that case, in that course, because then we were able to pull together the learnings from all the other courses that we had done, in particular, the ones that had touched on different aspects of different contexts, and we're able to pull together in those cases that learning that we have had over the period.
Thank you, Howard. And if you don't mind me asking a follow-up to everybody, Howard, I'm going to start with you, and just a quick 30-second to minute response. Your engagement with these cases, how were they a part of the class, right? James had indicated that at Harvard, at least, the grading was heavily weighted on class participation. Howard, to you, how was your case analysis presented to you, and how were you graded on that?
Again, it differed for the different courses. And, while I was preparing for this panel, I did get some feedback from other classmates to just make sure that my representation was a little bit more representative of the class. And some courses, it was graded, like we had to actually write, and it was graded, or reflection or analysis was graded. But others, it was just more discussion to prompt and provoke conversation.
Thank you. James, and then Stephanie.
So the curriculum at Harvard, you're graded individually, but it's rare that you don't participate as part of a study group. And so much of the effort is oriented on a study group or a team approach, simply to, I think, really handle the workload of, 15 to 20 cases a week. So that was very helpful because you found you learn things a lot quicker from people that had experience on a specific part of the case that I might not get to, especially coming from outside of industry, on my own in a lecture environment. The other point that was stressful, but I think valuable, was that it was pretty similar to my undergraduate experience at West Point. Every case was graded. Every class, you were expected to contribute something to the conversation. And there was a large pressure on avoiding what was called a cheap comment that didn't really lend to the advancement of the case. And so that was probably the hardest part of my experience, was I didn't have much to contribute in the way of business circumstance or experience. I did in terms of leadership and organizational challenges that I met when I was in the Army, but trying to get into the business conversation every single day because my grade depended on it was a little difficult. And I'm not sure if I like that or not now, having experienced both sides of the case method. I definitely like the ability as an analytic person to be able to dive more deeply into the topic rather than just spout off based on some element of my experience.
Thank you for that. And Stephanie.
In my experience, we were given the case beforehand with some discussion questions, and we read about it, thought about it, formulated our own responses, and then got back together with the group and discussed the questions and tossed ideas back and forth as the instructor kind of guided the conversation and touched on what we needed to touch on. And in terms of grading, we turned in responses, but we were also graded on discussion. And then at the end of the course, there was a case that we actually wrote, obviously, that was graded. That was undergraduate. Graduate was more hands-off. It was almost entirely focused on creating a case ourselves at the end. So that was just heavily weighted on the case that we created. But undergraduate was nice that it was more group, as you said, it was more group focused in that we were part of a group. We formulated our responses and considered our responses alone, but then we came together as a group and then addressed the class as a group with the instructor guiding all of us. But it was really nice to, as you say, get the input from the other students.
So this is the point where I'm actually going to jump to a later question, because I think it flows quite well here. And Stephanie, if you don't mind if I stick with you, and then we'll go back around the horn here. Was there a specific approach to case study analysis or learning that you found was particularly effective for you?
Well, as I said, the experience that I had worked really well. I mean, I really liked that we were able to initially go off by ourselves, be introduced to the case, read the case, gather our thoughts, have some discussion questions to kind of frame where we should be going with it. But then we got back together initially with our group for a few moments to kind of bounce ideas off of each other. And then in a larger classroom setting with the instructor guiding us, we all bounced ideas off of each other. And that was really nice. I think that experience worked really well, at least for me.
So you liked having the opportunity to read the case ahead of time prior to coming to class, and then discussing it that way. Great.
Very much so, yeah. Because and at least initially when I started, I was more of a numbers person. So I wanted the numbers, and I wanted to sit with the numbers and kind of work with them. And then, as I got more experience with the softer issues, then I was more comfortable to kind of just diving in, head first. But it was very nice to prepare ahead of time.
Great, thank you.
At least from my experience.
Great. James.
Sure. Far and away, I think the most positive aspect of the case study method for me was, and we've done this at USF too, was getting the protagonist into the classroom to hear the discussion was invaluable. It really adds a level of investment to your comment when the person you're criticizing is sitting right there. And so we've done that actually at USF as well. And it makes it so much more real to have to consider the case when that individual is sitting there. Beyond that, I think the other approaches that I've seen that really resonated with me and across the different programs is when the instructor does a fairly good job up front saying there's no wrong answer. You're in this program because you have experiences that we all can learn from. And so there's no wrong answer. There might be a better answer, but everybody has real experiences that we can learn from. And then to kind of really put the oomph into that, when a professor here's something that might be off the critical path, let's say for a particular case, and really gets in your face and kind of draws that out to understand where you're coming from. That's probably the most insightful I've seen, both as an observer and the recipient of the professor's added attention, because it really makes you think in a way that, like, I think we're all here for that lecturing doesn't really do. The analytics can be taught. I think the math and science, if you're in a science-oriented program, can be taught. But the process for dealing with people one-to-one like that was just invaluable. And I love that most about the case method.
Great, thank you, James. And by the way, some people in the chat are already anticipating some of our upcoming questions. So I think that means we're all on the right track here. So far, what we're hearing is James is almost talking about that free to fail environment, right? Where many of us, what we like about CASE is that it's meant to really stretch ourselves with our students at the same time and allow our students to stretch their legs in an environment where they are in fact able to test themselves, whether it's with the protagonist or not, and investigate their ideas. And to Stephanie's point, for some students in particular, it might be beneficial for them to feel like they've had the preparation to prepare ahead of time. Howard, for you, what did you find most effective in the case study usage?
Yeah, I definitely underscore the experiences of James and Stephanie as well. In particular, as James mentioned, when the protagonist is in the room with you, it brings a particular level of analysis. And one of my courses in entrepreneurship, we knew ahead of time that the protagonist was going to be in the room, and and we knew that he was looking for specific answers to help him through a particular difficulty, right? So that made us more invested that we were now helping him to solve a problem that he's wrestling with today. So that helped. A couple of things helped. Some of the students had limited case experience before the MBA program. It helped significantly when the professor set up that free to fail situation where they felt that, okay, so no answer is wrong. It also helped, and the professor could point to some, like, give them a guide as to how do I read a case, right? Because they don't know what to do. You know, it's not a textbook, right? But how do you read a case? Where do you put yourself in that case? Who do I become in that case? The protagonist. Am I reading it from the perspective of the CIO or the CEO? What is my role in reading this case, right? So when a professor is able to put that context up front, it significantly helped the learning. Talking about context, some of the cases do not have sufficient detail for people who are from a different industry. So when you're reading the case, like I am from IT, so the IT cases came very easy to me. Other classmates, however, were not from IT, and they struggled through some of those cases, right? They were asking about what would these things mean? How do I work with this? And so when we can provide some context ahead of them reading the case, here's what you're going to be reading about, here's why it's relevant. Despite the case being old, here's why that is still relevant. Here's something that you're going to be looking at, which is probably about interpersonal relationship, and why is interpersonal relationship relevant to this context, this industry, this context? Why are we studying that in this context? Setting that context really helped the learning and the reading of the case itself.
Howard, you bring up a great point. For a student's perspective, especially if they haven't worked possibly in that industry or have limited work experience, especially if you're talking about undergraduate students, the table setting, if you will, by the faculty member becomes crucially important. You also, added the additional point where not just if the protagonist is in the room, but if there's actually almost the consultant role by the student, right? In other words, they feel as though they're providing solutions, right? And so that takes them further out of the student's head and more into the employee, manager, leader head that we're trying to put them in. I actually want to ask the question that I believe it was Maria that put up, but Howard, you prompted me to ask this, and this is a simple yes or no 30-second question. How did you guys learn to analyze cases? Were you explicitly taught prior to taking a case, or were you just put a case in front of you and you kind of just work through it? Howard?
Put it in front of us and trial and error.
Okay, James?
Same. At Harvard, there's a tradition of picking certain people to open certain cases. So in marketing, the ex-IBMer always opened the first case, which was the Fieldcrest case at the time I was there. And in business, government, international economy course, the military guy always opened that first case. And we knew that going in, but it was cold call. It was there was no preparation. No, this is how you analyze it. But the flip side of that is you learn very quickly with a good instructor, because the instructor will pull the germane comments out and help you refocus kind of the non-germane ones. So it's trial and error. And I think that's probably the beauty of the case method, is you learn by doing very quickly.
Yeah. And to your point, then, the skill of the faculty member or the facilitator in the classroom does matter, especially if students haven't been potentially prepared for that. Stephanie?
Well, I guess I was rather fortunate because my instructor gave us our initial blush at the class was here's what a case is, and here's how you use it, and here's the kind of things you can expect from it, and here's the different sections, and here's how it's put together, and here's kind of the mindset that you have to go into it with. You're not finding X, you're kind of brainstorming ideas, and you're trying to understand the situation, and you're getting to be a fly on the wall, and you're solving problems that you aren't actually solving, but you're in that role. So, I mean, we were actually given quite a bit of guidance, which was really nice. I guess I was relatively fortunate, which is unfortunate, but yeah, and it did really help because, I mean, it's we're used to textbooks, you know. I mean, it's a unique thing, and it's really useful, and it works really well, but it's a foreign thing if you're not comfortable with it. So it does really help to be prepared, and it doesn't have to be, you know, weeks and weeks of exhaustive study, but just an initial, you know, here's how you look at it, here's the perspective, here's kind of the what we're hoping to get out of it. It was really helpful.
Right, great points. As a follow-up to you now, are there any specific learnings or takeaways that you distinctly remember coming from your experience with cases?
I think the first thing would be how important context is. As Howard mentioned, the industry survey is just crucial. I mean, especially if you're not in IT and you're reading an IT case and you're baffled. It really drove home the point that context is really important in decision making. So that really helped. And the other thing too was just as a communicator, it really clarified how important storytelling is in terms of, I mean, as an instructor, obviously, but even just as someone interacting with other people, as someone putting an idea across, as someone trying to understand something, being a storyteller is really important to communication and just the whole learning process. So those are the two main points to me that I really took from case studies.
Great, thank you for that. Howard, if I might jump to you, what were some of your takeaways that you draw specifically from case studies, if you have any?
I mean, in addition to some of the things I've mentioned before, I think one of the things that, to extend the points Stephanie just made, is when you think about context, bearing in mind that some of these cases were written at some time ago, right? And some of these students have no relation to that time period, right? And in particular, when you look at factors like the pest factors, you know, those would have changed substantially from the time when the case was written to now. So you're putting students and asking them to analyze something back then, but they're using today's lenses. And that time travel is difficult for students. So you have to set the context for them.
You know, and I love the way you put that you know, because the faculty member may be living in one time period and the students may be coming through another time period, right? And so some things that we may take for granted from also continually teaching the cases maybe year in, year out, we may or may not necessarily see the migration or the change of the student body as we're teaching these cases. That's a phenomenal point to make. James, how about you?
I think the biggest takeaway for me was probably understanding that you can have the right solution inadequately executed and still fail. And that's something that you probably can only learn in the case method when you're exposed to so much extra information around the decision. And the one example I can think of is there was a case, Mila Sciences, about an application that could diagnose melanoma about twice as effectively as dermatologists, and the protagonist failed to get it approved. And if you read the case, you were scratching your head, gosh, this is such a great innovation. What happened? Well, the protagonist showed up in class, and in the first 5 minutes, we understood why. He was irascible, he was aggressive, he ended up suing the FDA, and you could see right there that he was not the person for that job. And that was really the takeaway, was that public policy and interacting with policymakers was important. I think I'm reminded, actually, Howard, I just realized I reviewed the blockchain Shepherd case last year with you and Janice. And I remember in that case, you guys did such a good job of kind of identifying, even though we didn't have the protagonist in front of us, you did such a good job of identifying all of the color around what he was experiencing, that I felt like I knew him. And I think that's the takeaway, John, is that if an instructor invests absent the protagonist, invests in the color around the main players, you have such a greater appreciation for their decision challenge, the decision framework. So, yep.
So for all the administrators out there, faculty are extremely important to teaching.
Yeah.
Is that what you're saying, James? that for a student-focused classroom, we also have to understand that the faculty needs to be present and absent at the same time in some ways, right? In other words, the faculty member has to be there, but not be the draw to the classroom, right? And let the students speak. To that point, I think with the 10 minutes that we've got left, I'm gonna cherry pick some of these questions here and direct them specifically based on some of the responses that we've heard. So Stephanie, not to put you on the hot spot, but you seem to be the one that was most the one that felt the as though they needed to have more cases, or they wish they had more cases. So if I can ask you that question, were there any classes specifically that you wish there were cases in, or there may be specific course objectives that you think from a class that could have been brought out better by a case?
Yes, yeah, I do, definitely. I mean, I even have it in my notes. I mean, personally, I vacillated between economics and business before I settled on business. So I took a lot of economics classes as well. But I mean, a Goldman Sachs case study in business and banking, or a Volkswagen case study in marketing, or I have in my notes an Enron case study in OB. I mean, there are so many chances to make the textbook real. I mean, make the information real for students. And it's interesting too, because textbooks are starting to have little tiny case studies or little case vignettes. And I mean, it's becoming a little integrated into textbooks, but it's so valuable to have a deep dive into one specific instance at one specific company that it makes it real for students. It's a way to get experience without having been there. And it's really valuable. I mean, most of my classes, well, I mean, the small, the undergraduate, just general education classes, I don't know that there was that much opportunity for case studies, but once I got into my business classes, almost all of them could have benefited from case studies.
Great, thank you for that, Stephanie. Howard, you were talking, about and sorry, I'm actually going way off script on this. You were talking about how the actual financial impediments for the students, for the actual situation was holding that back to have access to the cases. Do you have any thoughts or suggestions around that for faculty members who may be trying to figure out how to teach to students, or how to get their cases out there for all students to be able to benefit, maybe not just those that have the immediate access?
Yeah, that's a difficult one. And solutions that I've heard, people have come up with is really about having local cases, right? So instead of going for the Harvard or the CRG or the NACRA published those cases, is to have local professors write cases about local situations. That's kind of the most plausible solution that I've heard.
I think that's a phenomenal solution. And in many ways, what you're talking about now is ensuring that those faculty members in those areas have the support to understand the case writing method, and they have the support of who's around them to be able to implement that for their students. Thank you for that, Howard. James, I think you're on the far end of the spectrum with having gone through so many cases through your education. Did you choose the programs that you chose specifically because they offered the case?
Yes, I felt very ill prepared going. I knew that I wanted a career in business after leaving the Army, and I just felt very ill prepared. Considering my peers I'd been in the Army for 5 years. I hadn't been. The world left me behind, and so I figured that I needed some very quick liftoff rocket experience, if you will, that introduced me to that very, very quickly. Since I think the only difference I might point out is since my background was in quantitative disciplines already, I didn't have that hurdle. I do remember a number of my classmates that weren't engineers or weren't STEM disciplined folks that struggled the first year because we dove right, and true in the USF doctoral program, statistics is still hard, 20 years later, it's probably harder than it is, when you're 22. So that's the only thing that I would be cautious about for those considering the case method approach is you kind of hit the ground running. And so you either have to be part of a case study group that can help you learn in parallel with the classwork, or you need to double down on your study and cover the areas that you might not know as much about.
Thank you for that, James. I don't get to say this very often, but I might actually be running on time. So what I've got right now is the one final question. I'd like to be able to, set aside maybe 1 minute to 2 minutes for each of you to respond to this. But, as the closing question, all of you, and then if we've got time, maybe we'll be able to have 1 or 2 questions from the chat. But, as faculty are walking away from this conference, as case authors or aspiring case authors are walking away from this conference and walking away from listening to you guys, as they're thinking about researching and writing cases, what advice would you give them so that way the cases that they are authoring resonate with their students? Stephanie, I'll start with you. I'll go to Howard and then James.
Okay. I think students relate to topical issues, first of all. I mean, there's always something interesting going on right now of course, there's a lag as you write, but generally the really interesting, important things that are going on still reverberate a while after they happen and can still be caught. I think relating cases directly to students' experiences, and that's more of an instructor's arena, but just focusing on interesting situations and making the protagonists feel like real people. I think that avoids making it read like a textbook. Conflict and urgency are always interesting. I've really enjoyed cases that have also focused on interpersonal dynamics, and in addition to more abstract issues like, should we launch the new product line? Should we do this? Should we do that? The dynamics of a family business, or the dynamics of succession, or those kind of interpersonal issues, at least personally, are really interesting as well. I don't know. I guess I would just avoid cases that are too generic or kind of too needlessly long, or kind of try and focus on 12 issues rather than deep diving into 1 or 2.
Those are great points. Absolutely great points, Stephanie. Thank you.
Yeah.
Howard.
So this morning I was listening to Peggy and Bill in the coffee session, and they put it this way: think about the gap in your teaching that you are trying to fill with this case. And I think that beautifully explains the thought of what I heard a lot of my colleagues talk about, like, what are you trying to get out of this case? Like, what do you want the students to learn from it, right? And use your cases thoughtfully as you use them in your courses, right? If you're, for example, if you're trying to pull together several other courses, be sure that the case you're using connects those concepts across different disciplines or so. Another issue I kept hearing over and over was the age of the courses. People are concerned about reading about cases and technology and concepts that are no longer relevant or not relatable to them, right? They're looking for courses that have cases that have a particular theme, right? Whether it be leadership or change management, hacking, issues that's relevant to them today. Mergers and acquisition, that's quite topical. These are some of the things that my colleagues had mentioned to me when I was talking to them about this. Fintech, choosing a service provider, a cloud service provider. These are some of the things that they're looking for when they go to a case. They want to walk away from the case feeling that they are empowered to do these things that the protagonist had to wrestle with. Just a few other things, a few other thoughts in actually writing the case. Graphical aids help a lot. If you can put a timeline in there, put it in there. If you can put an organizational chart, it helps. And then once you have done actually delivering the case, an update as to, since the case ended, what has happened subsequent to that. And as case writers, if you can probably add that in the teaching note so that the person who is actually teaching the case have that resource available to them to say, here's some of the things that you probably want to talk about.
That's a great point as well. Thank you very much, Howard.
Sure. I think
James.
the thing that resonates most with me with the most memorable cases is just adding as much color to the situation and making it a story as possible. Which is funny, since I'm an engineer, I don't think that way naturally. I've learned to write cases since, and a case that starts out with, it was a brisk fall day when Dr. Einerson sat at Boston Logan International Airport waiting for his flight. You can throw turns of phrase in there that are universal and identifiable, but with everybody. And as my colleague here at USF, Clinton Daniel, says, once you get someone hooked emotionally with someone or some part of the case, it overcomes a lot of maybe more natural barriers to that. And so I really feel like a geek. I read cases for fun now because they're just so fascinating to understand how different people approach different problems. So I apologize for being so enthusiastic about the case method, but yes, add as much color as you can. Write it as a screenplay.
I don't think speaking at a conference dedicated to case authoring, you have to apologize for your geeking out on cases. I think we'd all have to apologize to each other if that were the case. Sorry for the pun on that one, by the way. If at the risk of having a truncated summary, but from all three of you, what we kind of just heard was that we have to have a relevant story, a relevant context around the story that may be transported in time that the faculty member has to be aware of, but also that case study has to be laser focused. So that way, as the student steps into that story, the faculty member and the student can be guided together, right? So that we can come to the conclusion together. And as all three of you had said, that conclusion is something that a student feels is actionable at the end of that case study, right? They feel like after living the life of the protagonist, they themselves in some way have taken on those characteristics, and they can be hopefully a better manager and leader, or whatever the takeaways may be. So I want to personally extend my thank you to the three of you. I'm going to turn it back over to Danielle to close out the session.
I think my smile says it all. I've been active in the chat. This was incredible. Thank you for your time, your talents, your preparation, your reflections, your candor. So appreciated. I'd love it. Maria's out there. If you wouldn't mind, if we could all do a 1, 2, 3 and a big smile. Maria's going to take a picture of us. If we could smile. Maria, type in and tell us you got us. All right, we'll hope that she has us there. Thank you so much, and my goodness, thank you everyone for hanging out with us. We had fun with you, great participation. I know there were some questions that we couldn't answer, but we don't mind giving you personalized attention. So the emails of all of us are in the chat. To make things a little bit easier, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my email in here one more time, right here, so you have it. If you want data, if you want to be linked in with any of these amazing panelists, contact me and we'll get you in touch. Have a great rest of the, oh, hold on, typing too fast, pic looks great. Oh, Maria says we look good, fantastic. All right, great. Well, enjoy the rest of the conference. Stephanie, Howard, Jim, thank you again. We'll be in touch, okay?
Thank you. Yeah, thank you very much.
All right, happy writing, everyone.
Everybody,
thank you all.
All right. We appreciate it as well.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Have a great day.